I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the bedside table, barely past midnight. I didn't recognize the number. I hesitated, heart kicking in my chest, my mind still thick with sleep, but something in me said I had to pick up. So I did. A man's voice breathed heavily on the line, as if he were standing outside on a cold night. He said my name. Not Mr. Harrington, not a polite or formal greeting. He said John. Like we were old friends. I answered with a quiet yes, but got only muffled static and the slightest chuckle. Then he hung up. That was all. A voice, speaking my name like he owned it. 10 seconds long, if that. But it left me staring at the dark ceiling with an unease I couldn't shake. At first, I thought it might be one of those random calls from a drunk, or a friend who dialed the wrong number. But something in that low rasp told me otherwise. Something intimate. I couldn't sleep after that. I got up, splashed water on my face in the cramped bathroom of the apartment I now call home. It's a shabby one-bedroom across the street from the house I used to share with Elizabeth, my wife. Even now, weeks after I moved out, I still catch myself calling her that. My wife. But things have changed. I can see our old porch from this bathroom window. There's a single light on over there, casting its dull orange glow. Probably the hallway fixture we picked out together when we first moved in. Leaning over the sink, I stared into my own reflection. The lines on my face looked deeper, my eyes red-rimmed. It struck me that I didn't look like the man I was a year ago. Maybe not even like the man I was yesterday. One phone call, 10 seconds, had rattled me. And it was so quiet, that voice. I realized I was gripping the edge of the sink so hard my knuckles were white. The place was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I tried lying back down, but found no rest. I still wore my watch out of habit, my father's watch, scuffed on the rim, and the faint ticking felt as loud as a drum. I ended up in the kitchen, making coffee I didn't really want, with my mind racing. For a long while, all I could think about was that voice. I knew, deep in my gut, it wasn't some random stranger. It started months ago, though I might argue it began years before that. Small cracks in a marriage that I never noticed, or refused to see. One night, while I was still living in that house, I woke up in the early hours to see Elizabeth's side of the bed empty. The alarm clock glowed 2:13 a.m. Normally, she might be up with our son, but he was already asleep. I padded down the hallway, every board creaking under my weight, and found the living room lights off. Her silhouette was near the window, phone pressed to her ear. She turned sharply when I came into view. "Everything okay?" I asked. She only nodded. She ended the call quickly. "Just a client," she said, offering no further explanation. We were both silent, the tension so heavy I could feel it in my chest. I remember thinking she felt like a stranger that night, someone I couldn't quite reach. I caught the faintest whiff of perfume she'd rarely worn around me. I recall the subtle shift in her posture, the fluster in her eyes. It occurred to me, in a cold flash, that the distance between us wasn't just physical, but I forced myself to let it go. I was used to ignoring early warnings. In my line of work, once a police officer, now a private investigator, I'm trained to look for details, yet sometimes it's simpler to convince yourself that everything is normal, that maybe you're just being paranoid. But the distance grew, as did the sense of something hidden in her phone calls, her late-night messages, or the lingering glances she shared with her screen. I tried to brush it off, told myself I was projecting some midlife restlessness. Then one afternoon, I noticed she'd left her laptop open in the office. I had a legitimate reason to check something. House finances, maybe, but I accidentally stumbled upon a chain of emails, half buried, in a folder named Drafts. They weren't addressed to me. The language was charged, passionate in a way I hadn't seen from her in a long time. My stomach sank. I remember that cold, creeping sensation, like something inside me was being pulled apart. I confronted her in a gentle way, asked if everything was okay. She laughed it off, dismissed it as some marketing script she was working on. She forced a casual grin and said she was exploring new angles for a client who wanted a romantic spin on their ad campaigns. Even as she tried to reassure me, her eyes flickered. I recognized that flicker as I would in a suspect I was interrogating, an unconscious sign that truth was being withheld. But I let her talk, let her weave the story. The next time the betrayal made itself clear was in broad daylight, at a restaurant we used to frequent. A place with warm lighting, old jazz softly playing, and a decent wine selection. I was there on business, ironically, tailing someone else's cheating spouse. When you're a private investigator, you learn to blend in. I was alone, at a small table in the corner, scanning the patrons. Then she walked in, Elizabeth, wearing a blouse I'd never seen before. It hugged her figure, and she looked vibrant, hair styled in gentle waves around her shoulders. My heart started pounding because behind her was a man in a sharp suit. They slid into a booth not far from me. But they didn't see me. My vantage point was behind them. Then I heard the waiter's voice. "Nice to see you again, ma'am." With a new gentleman. An attempt at polite conversation from a server who recognized a regular, not realizing he'd just dropped a bomb. She stiffened, and I could practically feel her discomfort from across the room. My entire body tensed. I could smell my own sweat. Yet I didn't move or speak. I just observed. Her posture straightened like a startled cat, and she whispered something to the waiter. The man with her, tall, confident, lightly touched her hand across the table. And that was when I realized. This was not a chance meeting. This was not a business lunch. My breath caught in my throat because everything in her body language, everything in the way that man's voice rumbled softly across the table, screamed intimacy. I stood so abruptly that I nearly knocked over my water glass. My legs felt numb. I remember the waiter glancing my way in confusion. I walked out without waiting for my check. Didn't approach her, didn't confront them, didn't want to know more. I was a coward at that moment, or maybe I was just so sure of the truth that I couldn't bear to see it spelled out. Days later, an envelope arrived. A DNA test, something I'd sent for in secret after noticing more inconsistencies. I was convinced I was going mad. Or maybe I just wanted to prove to myself that my suspicions were paranoia. The results came quietly, like a funeral notice slipped into my mailbox. I remember reading the words that confirmed it. Our son is not my blood. Not my name. Not my legacy. My heart hammered in my chest. I stared at the lines that spelled it out in scientific terms. Probability of paternity, 0%. My hand shook. I felt an urge to crumble the paper into a ball, fling it into the trash, erase it all. But the truth was there, black and white. That evening, I confronted her. I asked the same question she used to ask me when we first started dating, back when she was the curious one. Where were you tonight? Why didn't you call? Are you hiding something? She tried to laugh it off, but it was brittle forced. She started spinning a new story, one more outlandish than the last. You're imagining things, she said softly at first, reaching for my hand, trying to appear tender. I pulled away. Then she insisted with more fervor, You're making this all up, sweetheart, leaning on the affectionate names that used to make me melt. But I was no longer that man. I studied her face, searching for some sign of the woman I thought I knew. But all I could see was a mask of denial and fear. Eventually, she turned defiant. Don't you dare twist this on me, she snapped, eyes flashing. But we both knew the game was up. I locked myself in the upstairs guest room, rummaging for clues, for confirmation that I wasn't insane. And I found it in small ways. Receipts for lavish meals, an expensive watch receipt not for me, text messages she hadn't deleted carefully enough. My profession was literally about uncovering truths, so it didn't take long to gather every damning piece of evidence. That same night, in angry frustration, I scrawled words on the mirror with her lipstick. You can still keep silent, but I can't anymore. The color was a deep red, almost like blood. I wrote it slowly, each letter shaking with the weight of betrayal I felt. A part of me relished the finality of that statement. I left the house soon after. Everything felt claustrophobic. I couldn't stand the bed, the walls, the pictures of us smiling on our wedding day. So I took a small apartment across the street, a twisted choice maybe. But at the time, it felt right. If I was leaving, I wanted to keep an eye on what was still, in a sense, my home. I took a few essentials: clothes, my father's watch, some personal documents. I gave up the big living room furniture we bought together, the fancy silverware she insisted on having. I had no appetite for fighting over things. My life had shrunk to just me and a single suitcase. She stayed in the house with our son, her son. I still wrestled with the heartbreak of losing the boy I'd called mine for years. I never yelled at him. I never blamed him. He was an innocent child in all this, yet the bitterness twisted inside me, night after night, as I sat in that dim apartment. I had nights so quiet that my mind would unravel, replaying every warm moment I'd once shared with Elizabeth, her laughter echoing in my memory, the way she'd rest her head on my shoulder after a long day, the way she'd come up behind me and wrap her arms around my waist as I cooked dinner. It all felt like a dream now, replaced by empty echoes and illusions. The confrontation about the child came later. Initially, I avoided that subject altogether, as if not speaking of it would lessen the pain. But eventually, I couldn't keep silent. I summoned her to the apartment one afternoon, told her I wanted to talk. She arrived, looking pale and exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. She stood by the door, arms crossed over her chest. "John, she began, but I cut her off. I showed her the test results, the official letter with the words that spelled out my heartbreak. She looked away, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "How long?" I asked quietly. My voice came out steady, even though I felt my insides trembling. "How many years did you let me believe he was mine?" She pressed her lips together, then finally whispered, "It was a mistake. It just happened once. I never wanted. One time." I repeated, fighting the urge to pace the room, to raise my voice. "Then how do you explain all these messages, these new receipts?" She swallowed hard. "That was different," she said softly, as if that would justify it. "Marcus, he was just a friend at first, and we started working together more." "Don't," I snapped, my composure slipping for a second. I grabbed the edge of the kitchen counter, knuckles whitening. "Don't explain it away." "I'm not a fool." She started crying, which only stoked my anger further. Part of me wanted to scream at her to stop, that she had no right to tears. But I just stood there, swallowing the rage. Cold is also an emotion, I reminded myself. Let it freeze you so you don't shatter. I told her to leave. She lingered, trying to speak, but I pointed to the door. She left without another word. Sleep became an elusive luxury. I'd wake up from nightmares, heart racing, sometimes hearing footsteps in the hallway of this apartment, or the quiet laugh of that unknown voice in my mind. I started remembering the late-night phone calls, the hush in her voice when she thought I was asleep. The DNA test letter still sat on my nightstand, a constant reminder of the final betrayal. Some nights, I stood at my window, staring at the house. I could see a silhouette in the upstairs room, probably Elizabeth pacing while the boy slept in his own bed. I felt an ache, a paternal instinct that wanted to protect him from the chaos, even if he wasn't mine by blood. But that only made the bitterness sharper, reminding me I'd been used, lied to. I discovered more evidence of the affair, pictures from a getaway, half-naked glimpses of the two of them. I can't unsee those images. They had an erotic charge that made my stomach twist. She was wearing that smile, that glow, like she'd found something purely thrilling. I'm not a prude, but seeing her looking at another man in that deeply intimate way was like a blade to the gut. I felt my face flush with a sick mix of shame and fury. I confronted her again, this time in our bedroom back at the house. I needed closure, or maybe I needed to see how far she'd go in her denial. "Explain," I said, holding a printout of one of the pictures. She had her arms around Marcus's neck, lips parted in obvious pleasure. She couldn't. She just stammered, "I'm sorry. You asked me once if I'd ever cheat on you." I reminded her, forcing my voice to remain calm. "Do you remember that? The night we got engaged, you said, 'Promise me you'll never betray me, John. Promise me you'll always be honest.' And I told you I would, because I believed in honesty. I believed in us." She said nothing, just looked down at the floor. Then I pinned the photo to the wall above the dresser, pressed it against the mirror she used for her makeup. "Take a good look," I said. "That's what you threw it all away for." She started to cry again, covering her face. For a moment, I thought about comforting her, an old habit that refused to die. But I didn't move. In the days that followed, I kept my distance. She left voicemails, messages, all saying the same thing. "John, let's talk. Please." I didn't respond. I had nothing left to say that wouldn't come out as furious shouts or quiet condemnation. One morning, I woke to find a message scrawled on my bedroom ceiling in red marker. "You didn't kill me. I did it myself." The letters were shaky, as though the person writing them was trembling. For a panicked second, I imagined Elizabeth had broken in to leave some cryptic note. But then I realized I had written it. I barely remembered doing it, but there it was, my own handwriting. Late at night, in a spiral of guilt and sorrow, I must have climbed on a chair and scrawled that phrase. It was both an accusation and a confession. She didn't kill the man I once was. I did it to myself by letting her betrayal define me. A few days later, I found her waiting in the apartment hallway. She had a spare key from a time we thought we'd still share everything. She insisted we talk. I tried to brush past her, but she cornered me, tears streaming. Her voice turned ragged. "John, we can fix this. There has to be a way." I studied her face, mascara smudged, hair unkempt, eyes red. She looked so different from the poised woman who once walked into that restaurant with her lover. Her shoulders sagged, and every breath shook. "You think we can fix this?" I said softly, letting out a humorless chuckle. "Liz, there's no going back. You had a child with him, or someone else, and you let me believe he was mine for years." She started to argue, but I raised my hand for silence. "I can't keep lying to myself," I added, "and I won't lie for you anymore. Go home." She reached for my arm. "John, please." I pulled away. My voice stayed low. "Liz, I'm someone else now." She cried louder, a choking sound. "I'm begging you, we can try counseling." I shook my head. The tears in her eyes no longer stirred any pity in me. A numbness had settled in my chest, a cold resolution that I needed her away from me. And so, she left, stumbling down the hall. Time drifted. I kept working as a PI, ironically helping other people confirm the lies their partners told them. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction each time I handed over photographic evidence to a client, or each time I tailed a cheating spouse to a seedy motel. It became a twisted therapy, a reflection of what I had gone through. And then, eventually, I encountered him. Marcus, the voice on the phone, the man in the pictures, the man who took what was mine. It happened unexpectedly. I left a client's office downtown and saw him exiting a gleaming high-rise, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an impeccably tailored suit. He paused when he spotted me, as though he'd been expecting this meeting. For a moment, we simply stared at each other on the bustling sidewalk. People brushed past us in both directions, but we stood immobile. He stepped forward. "John," he said, echoing that voice from my midnight call. The same low rasp. There was no apology in his tone, no real shame. If anything, he carried himself with confidence, like a man who'd already won the battle. My hands clenched into fists, but I kept them at my sides. "Don't say my name like we're friends," I replied quietly. He smirked. "I'm not here to fight you." I felt a wave of anger so strong it nearly knocked me off balance. I wanted to punch him, to break that perfect composure. But part of me, the rational ex-cop, stayed my hand. I exhaled through my nose, forcing my voice to remain level. You called me in the middle of the night. Marcus shrugged. I wanted to see how you'd react. Liz told me you left the house. I took a step closer, the crowd flowing around us, giving us space. Let me guess, you got curious about the man you betrayed. He held my gaze. I just wanted to be sure you knew where we stand. I barked a short laugh, humorless and cold. Where we stand? You and I don't stand anywhere. You made sure of that the moment you decided to get involved with my wife. His eyes flickered with something. Pride, maybe, or satisfaction. She made her choices, John. Don't place all the blame on me. A swirl of disgust coiled in my gut. Consider this your warning, I said quietly. Stay out of my business. Don't ever call me again. He inclined his head, an almost polite gesture, and stepped away. Suit yourself. Then he turned and merged into the crowd, leaving me trembling with rage. That night, I sat in the gloom of my apartment. Every light turned off, a single candle flickering on the windowsill. My reflection in the glass told me I was a shadow of who I used to be. I pictured Marcus's smug face, the memory of him with Elizabeth. I let the anger swell, then subside. I remembered something my father used to say. The best revenge is living well. It felt hollow right now. My father had never been in a situation like this. Or maybe he had. He died when I was 10. So I never got to ask him all the questions that swirl in a man's mind. Eventually, I realized I couldn't simply linger here, letting bitterness eat me alive. I needed finality. Something that would truly end this chapter. So I scrawled a new message, this time on the ceiling of the apartment, next to the first one. You can still remain silent, but I cannot anymore. I confronted Elizabeth for the last time. She was at the house alone because our son was at a friend's place for the weekend. She opened the door to find me standing there with a bag of old photos, the ones we'd taken on our honeymoon. She stepped aside, letting me enter in silence. The living room felt stale, as if life had drained out of it. No jazz, no scented candles, just a quiet space filled with tension. She wore an oversized sweater and slippers, her hair in a messy ponytail. She looked smaller than I remembered, weighed down by guilt or sorrow. John, she said, her voice almost too soft. I set the bag down on the coffee table. I'm moving on, I said simply. I'm done trying to figure out your reasons or your excuses. You wanted to fix this. We both know that's impossible. Tears welled in her eyes, and I felt a pang in my chest. But it didn't melt me the way it once would have. It just made me sadder, and, in a way, colder. I don't expect you to forgive me, she whispered, voice trembling. But I want you to know. I never wanted to hurt you. I'm so sorry. My throat felt tight. I looked around the living room. My gaze landed on the pictures on the wall. Wedding photos. The two of us cutting a cake, dancing, laughing. The happiness I see in my younger self feels like a foreign country now. I'm sorry too, I replied, that we couldn't be what we promised to be for each other. She broke down, sobbing, and I let her. This time, I had nothing to offer in terms of comfort. I stood there, watching the tears roll down her cheeks. She buried her face in her hands. When she looked up, her voice was raw. What about him? She asked, meaning our boy. He loves you. He may not be. She struggled with the words, but he sees you as his father. My chest tightened. I took a shaky breath. I haven't figured that part out yet, I admitted. I need time. She nodded, tears falling freely. I understand. I cleared my throat. I came here to do one more thing, I said, pulling a small envelope from my jacket pocket. Inside was a typed note. I typed it because my handwriting was too shaky. A final statement, to be left where she'd see it every day. She watched me curiously as I walked to the hallway wall. There, with a bit of tape, I affixed that note. You didn't kill me. I killed the man I was. Let this be a reminder for both of us." She made a strangled sound, half sob, half gasp. "John." I held up a hand. "That's my last word on it, Liz." Then came the confrontation with Marcus. I knew I had to face him directly if I wanted closure. Maybe it wasn't rational, maybe it wasn't wise, but I still needed something. A friend of mine who works security at the building where Marcus's firm is headquartered tipped me off to when he'd be leaving the office late. I waited in the parking garage, out of sight, the hush of my breath echoing in the concrete space. When Marcus appeared, I stepped forward. He looked up, startled, and then forced a grin. "John," he said, too casually. I approached, noticing the flicker of tension in his jaw. Maybe he wasn't as confident as he pretended. "She told me you want to keep seeing her," I said. "You think you have some claim to her now." He scoffed. "You walked away, right? So what's the issue?" I stared at him, my eyes burning. "The issue is that I need you to understand something. You didn't beat me. This isn't some victory for you." He tilted his head. "You came all the way here to tell me that." "Not exactly." In one swift motion, I grabbed him by the lapel and slammed him against a nearby cement pillar. He wasn't expecting it, and he let out a grunt of pain. My fist clenched, pressing into his collarbone. "You never call me again," I said, my words quiet, lethal. "Never call my phone. Never step onto my porch. Never so much as whisper my name. You're out of my life. Do you hear me?" He swallowed, glancing around the empty garage. "Loud and clear," he muttered, raising his hands in a sign of surrender. "Calm down." "I am calm," I lied. "This ends here." I let him go, stepping back. Part of me expected him to swing at me, but he didn't. He just straightened his suit jacket, eyes narrowed. I turned and walked away without another word. Leaving the garage, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I'd done something primal, something that felt like marking the boundary of my territory. But it didn't fix me. I still carried the weight of betrayal in my chest. Still, maybe it was enough. Weeks passed. I focused on my cases, delved into my work, building a reputation among local attorneys who often needed a thorough PI. I paid my bills on time, slept on a sagging mattress. Day by day, I felt like I was piecing myself together, forging a new identity. Sometimes, I'd see Elizabeth step out of the house across the street. She'd walk slowly, shoulders hunched, scanning the sidewalk like a woman expecting something to leap out of the shadows. She didn't wear heels anymore, didn't even glance around for the attention she once seemed to crave. And I'd watch, part of me pitying her, part of me still angry. I rarely saw our boy. I knew from mutual friends that he was doing okay in school, that he asked about me sometimes. That broke my heart in ways I can't articulate. But I needed more time before I could figure out what my role would be, if any. One afternoon, I stood in my apartment, staring at the battered ceiling. The red marker was still there. "You didn't kill me." I did it myself. I traced the letters with my eyes, remembering the fury and heartbreak that drove me to write them. Suddenly, I felt an urge to paint the ceiling, to bury those words under a fresh coat of white. But I resisted. Something about leaving them there felt important. A reminder that I'm a different man now, shaped by the pain but not destroyed by it. Eventually, she tried one last time to speak to me. She knocked on my door around dusk, a single tear shining on her cheek. She didn't barge in. She waited. I opened the door halfway, bracing myself. "I'm done," she whispered, voice hoarse. "Marcus and I ended it. And I understand if you can't ever speak to me again, but I wanted you to know." I nodded, silent. She exhaled, a trembling breath. "I'm sorry for everything. I know that might mean nothing, but I had to say it again." I studied her face under the dim hallway light. The regret in her eyes seemed real, but it didn't bring me comfort. It just felt sad. "Goodbye, Liz," I said softly, and closed the door. On the other side, I heard her footsteps retreat into the night. That was the last time we spoke face to face. Now I live quietly, day to day. In the mornings I jog around the block, passing the house with only a faint pang in my chest. At night, I sometimes catch a glimpse of her silhouette in the window, lights turned low. The porch lamp still glows that familiar orange. I don't know if she sees me in my window. If she does, she never waves. A friend asked me if I'd ever feel normal again. I didn't know how to answer. It's not about feeling normal. It's about learning to live with the cold inside. Because cold is also an emotion, and it keeps me from shattering. I still have nightmares, but they're less frequent. The phone call from that unknown voice plays like a rerun in my mind. Sometimes I dream it's my own voice calling me, telling me to wake up and face reality. But I'm awake now. That part of me died, and I had a hand in killing it. And on my ceiling, in that trembling red scrawl, are the words I wrote in the darkest hour. I don't erase them. Let it stay, a testament to the final acceptance of what was, and what will never be again. Let it remind me who started all this, and that I found a way to keep going in spite of it. Let her remember, too, across the street, each time she glances in my direction, that I'm still here, but not with her. I won't erase it. Let her remember who started it all.